The day my HOA president proudly announced that chickens were officially banned from the neighborhood, she stood there smiling like she had just solved a national emergency, but exactly 3 weeks later she nearly dropped her coffee when 2 6-foot-tall emus started patrolling my backyard like feathered security guards while every neighbor on the street stood outside recording videos. And the funniest part was she could not do a single thing about it because technically I followed every rule she wrote herself. My name is Cole Bennett, and I live in one of those suburban edge communities where neighborhoods slowly blend into open land farms and small ranch properties. A lot of homeowners around here kept small backyard chickens for fresh eggs, and honestly, nobody cared for years. The birds stayed quiet, the coops looked clean, and life moved on normally. Then our HOA president, Sharon Miller, decided she wanted to modernize the community image before this story gets completely insane. Make sure to like and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily because this might be one of the funniest HOA loophole stories I have ever lived through. Sharon was obsessed with appearances. She once sent violation notices over garden hose colors. Another time she complained that somebody's lawn chairs looked too relaxed for neighborhood standards. I honestly thought people were exaggerating until she targeted my chickens. Now my chickens were harmless. I only had 4 hens and they stayed inside. A clean fenced coop behind my garage. No roosters, no noise, no smell, nothing disruptive at all. Even neighbors liked them because my kids occasionally gave away fresh eggs during holidays. But Sharon suddenly decided chickens created a rural atmosphere. Inconsistent with community branding. Community branding. That phrase alone made half the neighborhood roll their eyes. She announced the new poultry ban during an HOA meeting, while acting extremely proud of herself. A few homeowners objected immediately, asking why harmless backyard hens suddenly became a problem after years of coexistence. Sharon responded by saying the community needed a cleaner, upscale identity moving forward. That was HOA language for I want complete control over everything. Received official notices 2 days later ordering all chickens removed within 30 days or fines would begin. My kids were crushed. They loved feeding the hens every morning before school, and honestly, the chickens had become part of our daily life. First, I considered just moving them to my cousin's farm outside town, but the more I thought about it, the more ridiculous the entire situation felt because Sharon was not solving any real problem. She simply hated anything she could not personally approve. So instead of rushing into a fight, I started reading every single HOA rule carefully, and that is where things became interesting. The poultry section specifically banned chickens, ducks, geese, and common domesticated farm birds, but buried deep. In another section was a completely different clause allowing registered security or guard animals if approved under property safety guidelines. That loophole sat in my head for 2 straight days. Then my friend Tyler, who owns an exotic animal ranch, jokingly said, emus actually make incredible guard animals. We both laughed at first, then we stopped laughing, because suddenly the idea sounded perfect. Now, before anyone thinks I randomly bought dangerous animals, let me explain these emus. We're already trained around people calm under supervision and fully legal to own under county regulations with proper registration. I spent over a week researching everything, fencing requirements, permits, handling safety and property guidelines, and once I confirmed the HOA rules technically allowed registered guard animals, the plan officially became real. The day the emus arrived was honestly one of the funniest moments of my life. My neighbors expected maybe large dogs or some security system. Upgrade instead, 2 giant, curious emus stepped out of a transport trailer and immediately started walking around my backyard like they owned the neighborhood. Kids across the street screamed with excitement. Adults came outside holding phones, and one old man nearly fell over laughing when one emu stared directly through Sharon's front window from across the fence. I named them Liberty and Chaos, which honestly fit perfectly. Now here is the funniest part. Emus are naturally alert animals, and surprisingly, territorial around unfamiliar movement, so technically they qualified under local guard animal registration standards after proper filing, meaning my paperwork was completely legal. The next morning, Sharon marched to my house so fast she still had curlers in her hair. She stood outside my gate staring at the birds like her brain physically could not process what she was seeing. Then she demanded to know why there were giant dinosaur birds in my backyard. I calmly explained they were registered guard animals protecting the property perimeter. The silence after that sentence was unbelievable. She looked at me, then looked at the emus, then back at me like she was trying to restart her entire nervous system. Finally, she shouted, "Those are not guard animals, they are livestock." I handed her copies of the county registration paperwork along with the HOA clause allowing approved guard animals. That was the exact moment her confidence cracked slightly, but she still was not giving up. Within hours, she called an emergency HOA board review claiming the EMUs created fear, confusion, and possible neighborhood instability. Neighborhood instability because apparently giant birds calmly eating lettuce behind a fence were now destroying civilization. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood absolutely loved them. People slowed their cars every evening just to watch the emus walk around the yard. Kids named them neighborhood celebrities. One teenager even made a social media page for them that started getting thousands of local views. And honestly, Liberty and Chaos seemed to enjoy the attention. Especially Chaos. That bird somehow knew exactly how to create drama. Every time Sharon walked near the fence, Chaos would slowly follow her movement without blinking, and it completely terrified her. One afternoon, she tried taking photos of the yard for another complaint report, and Chaos sprinted toward the fence at full speed, causing Sharon to drop her clipboard and run back across the street screaming, "Half." The neighborhood witnessed it. I am not exaggerating when I say people laughed about that moment for weeks. But behind all the comedy, Sharon was becoming obsessed with removing the emus. Because every day they remained legally inside my property made her authority look weaker. She started sending violation notices claiming excessive exotic animal presence, then noise complaints, even though emus are quieter than most dogs, then visual disturbance complaints because apparently tall birds existing peacefully was now offensive to neighborhood aesthetics. Each time I responded with documentation permits and rule citations proving compliance, and every failed complaint only made the situation funnier for everyone else. Then came the annual neighborhood barbecue event where everything completely exploded. The HOA board expected a calm, formal gathering about future community improvements. Instead, almost every conversation centered around the emus. Kids wore homemade Liberty and Chaos shirts. Someone brought cookies shaped like giant bird footprints, and one neighbor actually installed a toy security badge on their dog with guard animal written across it. Sharon looked absolutely furious, watching the entire neighborhood turn her failed chicken ban into a running joke. Then during the meeting, an older resident stood up and calmly asked why harmless chickens were banned if legally registered guard animals larger than grown men were somehow allowed. The entire room burst into laughter instantly. Several HOA board members could not stop smiling, because everyone understood the truth by that point. Sharon created the loophole herself by writing emotional rules instead of logical ones, and now she was trapped by her own attempt at control. That night, something shifted permanently inside the neighborhood. People stopped fearing HOA threats the same way they used to because they realized authority sounds powerful, until someone reads the fine print carefully. And standing quietly behind my fence, staring across the yard like giant feathery security guards, were the two animals nobody expected would accidentally become symbols of neighborhood rebellion. A few weeks later, the HOA quietly removed several outdated animal restrictions, because every meeting kept turning into jokes about Liberty and Chaos instead of serious discussions. Sharon eventually stopped talking about the emus completely after realizing every complaint only made them more popular with the neighborhood. The funniest part was my original chickens finally returned home too, because the HOA could no longer justify the ban after losing so much support from residents. By the end of summer, people were taking family photos beside the fence while the emus calmly walked around like local celebrities. If you enjoyed this story from Karen Stories Daily, then subscribe and comment below and tell me honestly, would you rather have chickens or two giant guard emus in your neighborhood?